Hi, you guys. Welcome as we read along to Atmosphere this month. We're going to read some chapters and then just let us know all your thoughts in the comments. I can't wait to chat with you and hear all your thoughts. All right. Are you ready? Here we go. December 29th, 1984. Joan Goodwin gets to the Johnson Space Center well before 9. And Houston is already airless and muggy. Joan can feel the sweat collecting along her hairline as she walks across the campus to the Mission Control building. She knows it's the heat, but she also knows that's not all it is. Her job today is one of her favorite parts of being an astronaut. She is Capcom on the Orion flight team for STS-LR9, the third flight of the shuttle Navigator. The role of Capcom, the only person in Mission Control who speaks directly to the crew on the shuttle, is one of many that astronauts fill when they aren't on a mission. There is something Joan often has to explain to people at the rare party she agrees to go to. The astronauts train to go up into space, yes, but they also help design the tools and experiments, test out food, prep the shuttle, educate students on what NASA can do, and advocate for space travel in Washington, talk to the press, and more. It's an exhausting list. Being an astronaut is not just about getting up there. It is about being a member of the team that gets the crew up there. Plus, Joan has already been. She has in her nightstand at home the elusive talisman that every astronaut aches for, the gold pin. Evidence that she was one of the chosen few humans who have ever left this planet. She has seen the spectacular shimmering blue of the seven seas from 200 miles away. Cerulean? Cobalt? Ultramarine? There was no shade vivid enough that she could name. 99.9% of human beings who have ever lived have never seen that blue. And she has. But now she is home, both feet on solid ground, and she has a job to do. So when Joan walks into the Mission Control building that morning with a black coffee in her hand, she is at ease. She is not anxious or terrified or heartbroken. All of that will come later. Okay. Intrigued! 7 years earlier, Joan's younger sister Barbara had called her one morning to tell her about a commercial she'd seen on TV late the previous night. It said, "This is your NASA." "What?" Joan said. She was in her kitchen, pouring herself a cup of coffee, the phone held between her shoulder and her ear. She was about to head to the car. Her first class of the day at Rice University was a survey course on the cosmos, offered to freshmen of all majors. Although she had a PhD focusing on an analysis of magnetic structures in the solar corona, she was spending her expertise teaching 18-year-olds the definition of a parsec. But, as her department chair had pointed out when she gently asked for a different assignment, someone has to do it. Apparently that someone just so happened to be the only woman in the department. "What do you mean, this is your NASA?" "That's what she said, the woman from Star Trek." "Hold on, I wrote it down somewhere. I saw the commercial just before putting Francis to bed, but I was able to grab a pen before it was over. Here it is. This is your NASA, a space agency embarked on a mission to improve the quality of life on planet Earth right now." It was Nichelle Nichols. That's her name. That was driving me crazy. They were recruiting astronauts, scientists, to go up into space. They specifically said they wanted women. Joan put the lid on her coffee. They said, female scientists? When Joan was 12, she had read a newspaper article mentioning the Flats, First Lady Astronaut Trainees, involved in what was known as the Women in Space program. That group of 13 women had been privately tested and trained by William Randolph Lovelace II, the same physician who had helped select the Mercury program astronauts. He'd done it on his own, outside of NASA, in hopes that the organization might recognize the potential of female candidates. But the article where Joan first read about the program was the same article in which she learned of its demise. The Flats needed NASA's approval in order to be granted permission to complete their testing at the Naval School of Aviation Medicine. Days before they were scheduled to arrive, they were notified that NASA would not approve their request. A congressional hearing in which many of the women testified about gender discrimination did nothing to change the NASA administrator's mind. John Glenn had even been quoted as saying that women not being accepted as astronauts was a fact of our social order. Joan had spent a lifetime looking up at the stars, but had not imagined herself in a spacesuit in a very long time. They definitely said scientist, and they definitely said women, Barbara told her. Joan put down her coffee and took the phone from her shoulder into her hand. You really think I could be an astronaut? Joan said. You study the stars. Who else could they possibly be asking for? I don't know. You really think I should apply? Joan asked. Barbara sighed. Oh, forget it. You've zapped all the fun out of it, she said, and hung up. As the dial tone kicked in, Joan took the phone from her ear, slowly put it in its cradle, kept her hand on it for a moment, staring at the receiver. 2 weeks later, without telling Barbara, she requested an application. As she filled it out, she could barely look at it directly. Me, an astronaut. And yet, she went to the library to Xerox her documentation, then stuffed it all into a 9x12 envelope, a summary, thus far, of everything she'd accomplished on Earth. She walked to the post office, and without allowing herself to agonize any further, dropped it into the mail slot. That January, Joan walked out her front door on the way to teach another introductory level course, and saw a newspaper in the apartment complex's driveway. She picked it up and noticed the headline below the fold. NASA chooses 35 new astronaut candidates, including 6 women. Joan swallowed hard as her eyes began to sting. She got into her car, threw the newspaper onto the passenger seat, and stared at the steering wheel for 17 minutes. It was the only time in her career she had been late to a class. Okay, well, we're getting into it. Exposition, word. All right, here we go. Summer 1980. In the months after learning she'd be joining the astronaut corps, Joan did 3 things. First, she gave notice at Rice. On her last day, the physics and astronomy department threw her a going-away party. By the punch bowl, Dr. Siskin asked, in a way that struck Joan as remarkably transparent, how'd she manage to pull this off? Joan said, luck, I guess, and then regretted it. Joan knew that Dr. Siskin, and most men like him, had never taken a good look at her. She was used to it. After all, she was not Barbara. She had never commanded the attention of the entire room with how great she looked in a dress, or how well she delivered a comeback. Once, when Joan was a teenager, her mother told her that she and her sister each had their own strengths. She said that Barbara's were loud and Joan's were quiet, but both were powerful in their own way. When her mother said this, Joan hugged her. Joan knew she was easy to overlook. She was average height and a bit stocky. She dressed simply. Her light brown hair was just past her shoulders, but she didn't wear it feathered like some other women did. Instead, she pulled it back loosely. Sometimes, when Joan saw herself in photographs, she was struck by how beautiful her smile was, her dimples making her face seem friendly and bright. In high school, Adam Hawkins had said so, but she didn't expect other people to notice. She also didn't expect other people to ask what she did in her spare time. She was a classically trained pianist, had run 2 marathons, was an avid reader, and an amateur portraitist, among other things. When people came into her office and saw some of the sketches on her wall, she knew they'd assume she bought them somewhere. When someone admired them, she never bothered to tell them she'd drawn them. The praise was never the point. In any case, no one in a long time had asked her about herself enough to know any of this. And Joan found a familiar peace in going unnoticed. So it came as a huge shock to the men in the department, many of whom fancied themselves secretly destined for victory, to see that the woman they'd overlooked was lapping them in a race they did not know they had started. Joan looked around the room, put her drink down, and left her own goodbye party early. She's on for new adventures. Ah! Okay, till next time!